From New Hampshire Public Radio, I'm Laura Canoy, and this is The Exchange. Welcome to the first in our series of Rudman Center Conversations with the Candidates, coming to you from the Rudman Center at UNH School of Law. Kicking off our series tonight is Republican U.S. Senate candidate Scott Brown. On Wednesday, we'll sit down with Governor Maggie Hassan, and next week we'll talk with U.S. Senator Jeanne Shaheen. Throughout the hour and this series, I'll encourage candidates to discuss what they would do rather than waste valuable time attacking their opponents. And we'll take questions from our audience here at the Rudman Center. And Scott Brown, thanks for kicking it off, and thank you very much for being here. It's nice to meet you.
It's good to see you too, Laura.
Well, let's start with the big picture, Senator Brown. What do you see as the two biggest challenges facing our country right now that you would like to just jump in and tackle as a U.S. Senator from New Hampshire?
Well, unfortunately, there are more than two. If you look at what's happening with Obamacare and the business mandate coming in after the election, it really is still the number one issue affecting our businesses. They're deeply concerned about the lack of knowing what's next, so they can't plan. That's number one. Number two is the high cost of energy. You have a situation where we have some of the highest energy prices in the country. We have the inability to have a good delivery system for our natural gas and storage capacity. That's a real challenge. Then you throw in what's happening with our border and what's happening with border security as it affects our world policy. As you know, we have found out as recently as today that we have 100 people who have, in fact, returned from fighting with ISIS. And how are they returning? Well, they're using their passports, but there's a potential that they're also coming through the porous border. And then the debt and deficit that our country is facing, almost $18 trillion. And then throw in, finally, not only our veterans and the care and coverages that they deserve, but the gridlock in Washington. And you know that I was the most bipartisan senator in the United States Senate, so people understand the differences. And just to finish by saying, you know, Senator Shaheen is a nice person. I've worked with her. This isn't about personalities, as you said. It's about policy, and it's about drawing the distinctions on our records because we have a very unique opportunity in New Hampshire. You have two senators who actually work together. They took the votes on the same bills, so people can figure out where we stand on various issues. I'm going to be drawing those comparisons.
Okay, so lots to go through, and I've got lots of questions on those. Obamacare, high cost of energy, border security, debt and deficit, the gridlock in Washington. And for sure, let's start with foreign policy. You mentioned the situation with ISIS. It's getting pretty scary out there. And the word is, Senator Brown, that you are going to give a major foreign policy speech on Wednesday. Can you give us a little sneak preview?
Well, I think it's important. It's one of the most important things. It's actually increased in terms of its relevance over Obamacare and energy. People are deeply concerned. Moms, as they're traveling around doing their daily work with the dads and the families, they're concerned about what's happening with not only our porous border, but what the potential is. As you know, we have people who have chosen, for whatever reason, to leave our country and go overseas and fight in Iraq and Syria. They have said that they want to take up arms, they want to kill us, they want to march down Pennsylvania Avenue and plant a flag in the White House. So what's our goal? Our goal is to make sure that that doesn't happen. I filed on two separate occasions a bipartisan piece of legislation that would have stripped their citizenship because they have left that citizenship at the door. It's been filed again, and the bad thing about it is we really didn't need to be in this situation. And we could have a whole show on this very important issue because back in October of 11, I and other senators wrote a letter to the administration saying, please don't leave Iraq as is. Do not leave that void so you can have criminal elements come into Iraq. In fact, what's happened, we have Iraq and al-Qaeda that's now ISIS, that has resources, had tools, it has equipment, and they have running an area now that's bigger than New England. So what do we do?
Yeah, is that what you're going to be saying tomorrow?
We're going to be talking about solutions. We're going to
do?
be drawing comparisons between Senator Shaheen and I on that very issue because she didn't sign that letter asking the administration to, in fact, not leave Iraq. She's been almost in the silent shadows of the president supporting those failed policies 99% of the time as a member of the Foreign Policy Committee.
Let's talk about what you would do, let's say, if you were still in the U.S. Senate. As you know, Senator Brown, just recently Congress gave approval to President arming moderate Syrian rebels to battle the so-called Islamic State. Senator Shaheen and Ayotte and Representative Custer voted in favor. Representative Shea Porter voted against. How would you have voted, Senator Brown?
I think you need to step back. I would have voted for it because I want the president to succeed. As the president of the United States, I want him to succeed. But you have to look back and see, why are we in this situation? Back in October 11, we asked him to not make sure that we left that void there. And there were efforts. All of his leadership team said, Mr. President, we need to back the moderate Syrian Free Army. We need to back them. And he rejected that. So here we are playing catch-up. And it's putting us at a disadvantage, not only with our arms, but with our strategy. Because here's what the problem is. Our allies don't trust us, and our foes don't fear or respect us. When you draw a red line and you do nothing, when in fact a situation takes place, it's problematic.
Is it just the president, Senator Brown, or is it just Americans are fatigued, they're tired of war? Was he reacting to, a feeling that, we've been in Iraq for so long, we were in Afghanistan, it's someone else's problem, let's just stay out?
Well, first of all, I can't speak for the president, but I can tell you when I was there, spoke with him and his team about what we were going to do in Syria. He could have executed a status of forces agreement and left a reaction force, a transition force there, as we have done in Germany, Japan, Korea, and other areas. To think that we would just leave as is, leave all, and you speak to any Iraqi veteran, you leave all of that blood, those lives on the battlefield and just leave it all there with nothing to show for it. We're going backwards potentially. Even General Dempsey has said, we may need to put boots on the ground, sir. Well, the president and Senator Shaheen already took off the table our number one asset there to show that we are serious about the situation.
Well, do you think we should put boots on the ground, Senator Brown?
I would rely on the generals on the ground to make that determination, but to think that we will not have all options on the table, all tools in the toolbox, it's unfortunate, because do you think ISIS is taking anything off the table? Do you think our enemies are taking anything off the table? So we have a deterrent, and one of our deterrents is that we have the greatest military in the world. And when we say that we are serious and we are going to take a stand, people listen. When you immediately take that chip off the table, it puts us at a disadvantage, not only militarily, but when it comes to our foreign policy.
As I mentioned, 3 out of New Hampshire's 4-member delegation voted in favor of the president's action. Carol Shea Porter, the Democrat from the 1st District, voted against. And here's what she said. I thought it was interesting, Senator Brown. I'd love your thoughts. She said, I don't believe that we can properly identify the recruits to determine if they are trustworthy and won't turn on us and our allies using our own weapons. And I don't believe that we should step into this Shia, Sunni, and other battles and into a civil war where allegiances shift and groups unite and divide constantly. How do we really know who we're allying with, whether that's the right person to ally with, whether our ally today might be our enemy tomorrow? I mean, we've gotten dragged into this stuff before.
It's a difficult question. That's why you need to rely on the intelligence on the ground, our embassy personnel, our Arab League partners, the leaders who are directing us, obviously CIA and other types of individuals, State Department, who are looking and giving us that guidance and information. But the problem is we missed an opportunity to actually work with those moderate forces. And since then, they've morphed into something more.
In Syria, you're talking
about
Syria,
now? Yes. And once again, when that in fact happened, Senator Shaheen, as a member of the Foreign Relations Committee, had an opportunity to speak up, and she chose not to. As a matter of fact, it wasn't until August 28th, I believe, was the first time that she's made any statement on ISIS.
Well, and we'll talk to Senator Shaheen next week about that. I have one more question on this for you, and maybe when we get some questions from our audience here at the Rudman Center, we might get more on this foreign policy question. But here's another question for you, Senator Brown. Everyone understands the desire to fight fire with fire here in New Hampshire. We were devastated to see the terrible murder of one of our own. And yet there are those who worry that more U.S. military action, airstrikes, boots on the ground, will just create more angry young men, that American involvement is their number one recruiting tool. What do you think about that? Do you share that concern?
As someone who's just retired from the military after 35 years as a colonel, worked at the Pentagon, have a good understanding after being on armed services and Homeland, the nature of the threat. Of course, I'm concerned, but here's my real concern. My concern is we have a radical Islamic terrorist group who is saying that they want to march down Pennsylvania Avenue and plant a flag in the White House. They, according to the president's own staff, has said it's one of the most well-armed, well-financed armies. They cover an area the size size of New England. We have a very serious problem on our hands, and if we fail to work with our Arab League partners and our allies, it could become something even more. So I have said prior, when I was a United States Senator, to the President that we need to obviously do something. He did not listen. He did not follow any of the guidance that we provided him. However, now we're playing catch-up. He called ISIS the JV. With all due respect, it's that incoherent and firm commitment to understanding the nature of the problem and actually following through with a plan and having a plan that's creating a lot of what you're talking about.
Well, and we'll listen for more details in your speech on Wednesday, major foreign policy speech, given here in New Hampshire.
Yes, that's correct.
Turning to immigration, we have a question here, and you mentioned that as another one of our nation's major challenges. We've got a question from our audience here at the Rudman Center from Carol, who says, we hear about problems securing the southern border so that criminals and terrorists are stopped from entering. How would you seal the border? Carol, thank you for that question.
Well, Carol, thank you as well. The border is not secure. We need to secure the border, and we can do that through a whole host of means, through walls, through fences, through natural resources, the natural boundaries and barriers, through troop reinforcement or law enforcement personnel. It depends on the nature of the threat. It depends on the nature of the opening.
And we're mostly talking about the southern border here,
Yeah,
although there has been
course.
some concern that Canada's policies
Canada
aren't
did
as
their
tough
job
as they could
today,
be.
and they've done their job, and they seem to do it well. But obviously, we're talking about the southern border. To think that we have a situation down there that's allowing that porous border is allowing not just criminals and potential terrorists, but just regular folks who are trying to flee from hardship in other countries, just walking through our borders is not appropriate. We have mechanisms, so here's what I would do, and here's where we once again are going to draw those distinctions. I voted to secure the border on 2 occasions. I voted to send troops to the border on 2 occasions, and Senator Sheen did not. When we look at the opportunities to do just that and provide the tools and resources to our personnel to make sure that we are safe, it's a real issue. And we need to move quickly because I am concerned, like many other people, about who is coming through there, what type of criminal or terrorist elements are coming into our country.
You said they're just walking through the border. Are people really just walking through the border?
Yeah.
Down the southern border?
Yes, they're walking. They're climbing over fences. Yes, you know as well as I do that there is a very serious problem there.
Well, Senator Kelly Ayotte, who has endorsed you, and more than 20 other Republicans, and Senator Shaheen supported a bill called Senate Bill 744. I'm sure you're familiar with it, Comprehensive Immigration Reform. Senator Ayotte said this would secure our borders, fix our broken immigration system. It has a lot of tools and resources to make sure the border is secure. $30 billion for Border Patrol, 19,000 new Border Patrol, $8 billion for more fencing, $6.5 billion for more surveillance. So this sounds like a lot, about $45 billion. Where do you think this falls short, Senator Brown?
Well, I would not have supported it. I appreciate Senator Ayotte's endorsement, certainly, but we're not going to agree on everything. What I had thought in that bill, and still do, is that there were incentives in there to continue on with that, the incentives to reward that illegality, people coming here, and whatever process that we were going to go through to get them to step out of the shadows, so-called. There were incentives in there that were not, that were built in. So good start. But it didn't go far enough for me.
So if there's 2 pieces to this, one is border and the other is how you treat the estimated 11 million who are already here. Let's start with just border. So what more does this bill need to have to satisfy that border requirement?
Forgetting about a bill that failed, let's not talk about a bill that failed. Let's talk about where we're going first.
Okay.
And let me tell you my position on immigration. First of all, I believe that kids that come to this school and other schools should be able to get not only the diploma, but the ability to stay here and work and live here and become citizens. I also believe that if we have an executive need where we have people who we can't fill jobs, they should be able to come here and work here, as well as our seasonal workers. If there's a hole that needs to be filled, we need to actually do that. But we need to do all of that, but the first thing we need to do is to secure the border. We need to have an e-verification system for our employers, so if somebody comes to them and says, "Hi, I'm Scott Brown, here's my Social Security card," and it turns out to be false, that they're held harmless. So taking all of that, you're saying, well, what do we do with the 11 million people that are here?
Yeah, once they're here.
Whatever we do, whatever plan we come up with to have them step out of the shadows, I personally cannot allow them to continue to get the EBT cards, the preferential housing, and a lot of the other benefits that are going before sometimes some of our own citizens, but more importantly, ahead of those almost 4.6 million people that are following the laws and doing the things, doing it right. So, for example, what's the problem? Why are there 4+ million people still in line waiting 2, 4, 6 years? Why can't we fix that?
Make that go faster.
Yeah, we have to fix that. We have to fix that. Is it more money? Is it more computers? We need to start with the basics. We need to fix this broken immigration problem, and that's what we're going to continue to try to do.
So, a couple things. So, getting back to border security, because everybody says we have to secure the border. Again, it sounds like Congress in this bill, which failed, as you said, did a lot of resources. It sounds like they're already building walls and putting lots of border agents down there. I'm just wondering what more you think needs to be done at the border, and then we can talk about the 11 million people already here.
Governor Perry felt that it's not enough. He's called troops up because and if you live there or visited there, if you've spoken to Senator McCain and Senator Kyle and Senator Flake, you'll understand that it's a real danger. People are being hurt, they're being killed. Their assets are being stolen and taken. It's a very real problem. The federal government has failed to do its job. So the things we need to do are a good first step. We need to do the fencing. We need to do a wall. We can use aerial surveillance. We can use the natural boundaries, as I said. There are a lot of things we can do, and unfortunately, they're not doing them right now.
You and others have also talked about your concerns that this bill and other proposals have offered a amnesty, a quote-unquote pathway to citizenship. Supporters of this bill, including, again, Senator Ayotte, said that there were very tough tests over the course of a decade to ensure that only eligible illegal immigrants receive legal status. That's from Senator Marco Rubio. I've looked at this bill. Boy, the pathway that it lines out seems pretty tough. So how did this bill amount to amnesty in your mind, Senator Brown?
It's a bill that failed. And to continue to talk about a bill that failed, I don't think is productive. I would move forward and work on a bill that has a chance to pass. And one of the things that we can do is work incrementally and doing the first thing that needs to be done in any bill, and that is to absolutely make a firm commitment to secure the border. And that was a good first step in that regard. But I had felt, and many other people who voted against it felt, that it provided incentives, that it did create a backdoor amnesty opportunity, and I don't feel it was appropriate.
What do you do with the 11 million, 12 million people who are already here illegally?
Once again, whatever we do, whatever plan comes up, and I look forward to being part of that solution, is to make sure that we don't incentivize that illegal behavior and continue to provide them with benefits that, quite frankly, they haven't earned and they don't deserve, and allow the people who have followed our laws and our citizens to, in fact, get those benefits. So whatever we do in the future, I look forward to being part of that solution.
Do illegal immigrants get welfare benefits, education benefits, food stamp benefits? It's my understanding that they don't, that most of them don't.
Most of them, or all of them. So the people are getting benefits that they're not entitled to, and we need to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Do you deport those 11 million people?
No, I don't think you're talking about deporting. I've never said the word deport. I don't believe that. I've said if there is a pathway to working, not a pathway to citizenship necessarily, but a pathway to working, I'm listening. But once again, whatever it includes, it can't include those incentives and those rewarding of that illegality.
Well, we will talk a lot more in just a moment. More conversation with U.S. Senate Republican candidate Scott Brown in just a moment. I've got a couple questions for you, Senator Brown, from our live audience here at the Rudman Center. Coming up, we'll take a look at Obamacare, also the high cost of energy, and we'll take a little bit of a look at what Senator Brown calls the gridlock in Washington. That's definitely an issue on voters' minds this election season. Again, if you're in the audience with us, we'll take some of your questions and comments in just a moment. So keep it right here. This is The Exchange on NHPR. You're listening to our conversations with the candidates at the Rudman Center at UNH School of Law. This is The Exchange on NHPR. Welcome back to the first in our series of Rudman Center conversations with the candidates at UNH School of Law. Our candidate is the Republican nominee for U.S. Senate, former Massachusetts Senator Scott Brown. Again, we encourage our audience here at the Rudman Center to write your questions down on the cards, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. I did want to talk to you about health care, Senator Brown, since you mentioned right at the beginning when I asked you some of the biggest challenges facing our country. You said number one, Obamacare, the uncertainty that businesses have. We could probably talk for the next half hour on this, but next week. But a couple questions for you. The Affordable Care Act, again, many call it Obamacare. You said you'd like to repeal it, and yet you did support so-called Romney Care in Massachusetts, which provided the model for Obamacare. So what's right, Senator Brown, about Romney Care, but wrong on Obamacare?
Well, you're assuming that it did provide the model. You're listening to the president, and with all due respect, they're not different, because I voted for and worked on the plan that Massachusetts adopted because it addressed issues very particular to that state. I believe we should have the same opportunity in New Hampshire. We should be able to develop a plan that works for us and takes into consideration all of the things that we care about. And what worked for Massachusetts may not work for New Hampshire. What Tennessee and Utah and Oregon were trying to do to develop plans for them may not work for us. So here, let's take Obamacare. It's a situation where we, as I know, rammed it through parliamentary maneuvers, through reconciliation. Senator Shaheen, and along with every other Democrat, were the deciding votes on that bill. They didn't read it. Had they read it, they would have recognized that it had 18 new taxes in it and that it cut $750 billion from Medicare. It was a terrible bill in that it really took away the rights and freedoms of many citizens, put in place a bureaucracy. When I look at the VA and I see Obamacare is the VA in a little while. It's just too top-heavy, too many layers, and it takes away choice. In New Hampshire in particular, we have 10 out of the 26 hospitals outside the network. And as you know, when Senator Shaheen was in charge, when she was not a U.S. Senator, the laws were changed and chased away almost 25 insurance companies. We had and have one until after the election. We may be getting more. To think that the plan passed in Massachusetts is similar. It didn't raise taxes. It didn't cut $750 billion from Medicare. It incorporated things that were important to people. It dealt with pre-existing conditions. It dealt with catastrophic care. It dealt with covering your kids up to 25 years old at that point. And it was done. Guess what? It passed 198 to 2. And you know why it passed? Is because everybody was at the table. Everybody sat down and figured out what would work for them. And here's what the problem is with Washington. They want you to think that Obamacare is the only answer. And with all due respect, I think we can do it better. And we can incorporate competition and respect the rights and freedoms of people.
So let's talk a little bit more about that. First of all, on Massachusetts, real quick. From what I understand, Massachusetts didn't have to raise taxes because the federal government helped pay for it through Medicaid funding. So in a way, you could say that it didn't raise taxes on Bay Staters, but it raised taxes overall. At least it took federal funding overall.
You can say that, but it did not raise taxes. There were no taxes going into individuals. They took advantage of opportunities that were already out there, used mechanisms, and used every single opportunity to maximize the benefits that the federal government was paying them and allowing them to proceed. But here's the difference. We had the so-called Cadillac plans, which right now, as a result of Obamacare going into effect, all of our union brothers and sisters and all the teachers, firefighters, police officers are getting hammered right now. Their costs are going up 40%. Cities and towns and everybody in this room is going to be paying for that problem that's developed as a result of Obamacare. So if you look at how are you going to fix it? It's a real problem, and I'm deeply concerned about the Cadillac tax. And once again, that's something that Senator Sheen supports, and I don't.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about what you would do then. And again, pulling off of what you don't like about Obamacare, but what do you like about it? What if New Hampshire were to start over, what elements of Obamacare might be included in a New Hampshire care?
Well, let me ask you a question. I mean, what's important to you? Because I think you play a role. You're a leader in this community. You're a leader in this state, as well as everybody in here. You have a role to play. And what is important to me may not be important to you. The things that I like are that I think it's very problematic to think that if someone gets a catastrophic illness that they may lose all of their assets. The fact that you have something in there that prevents that is a good thing. Something we did in the plan that I supported prior. It's something that other plans can incorporate. That's one thing we can start with. We can address all the things that people care about. And to think that we can't do it on our own is just wrong. We have smart people here that can play a role in this process. The state of New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Utah, Tennessee, other states who have tried to develop plans are being thwarted now because of Obamacare and the big wet blanket on their creativity.
So let's say that Obamacare is repealed and the states can do it.
I've already voted 5 times to do it.
And I think the U.S. House has voted many more times than that.
Right.
I think 50 times or so in the last 4 years. So let's say it's repealed.
Yep.
New Hampshire starting from scratch. What does that mean, Senator Brown, for the 40,000 granite staters who have coverage on the exchanges the 50,000 poor people here in New Hampshire who are newly eligible to be covered through Medicaid expansion. What does it mean for those folks? Is their health care all gone?
Let's talk about those 40,000. Well, 22,000 of them were kicked off a plan. And I can tell you story after story after story about how Obamacare has crushed their families and has put a very serious wet blanket on Obamacare.
So you're saying that the people who bought coverage on the exchanges, half of them had to buy on the exchanges because they were kicked off because of Obamacare.
I would argue that that's the case, yes.
Yeah, I'm interested in that because Lisa Girton from Anthem Blue Cross, the only provider right now on the exchanges, said that most of the new enrollees were new to them. We're new people.
To them. Right, but if you actually take the amount of people, when you're going to find somebody to do something, more than likely they're actually going to do it. So let's take the 22,000 plus adding up to 40,000, and then the so-called 50,000 who are on Medicaid,
what about those
Medicaid
folks
expansion.
if it's repealed?
To think that I don't want to make sure that people have care and coverages is wrong, because I've already supported a plan that addressed all those things. Why can't we incorporate that into the state plan? Why? Do you have anyone else have a good?
It could look like that.
If it's something that someone cares about, you can have that Cadillac plan all the way down to the fully subsidized plans that a state cares about. And once again, the key is we have to get everybody in the same room. We have to have all the thinkers, Anthem. We have to have all the care providers, the professors, the leaders like you and others at the table to develop a plan that incorporates competition, that respects people's rights and freedom, and actually addresses the care and concerns of everybody. To think, once again, folks, that the federal government is the only answer, I disagree with that. I'm more of a states' rights guy in that regard.
So let's say Obamacare is repealed and New Hampshire comes up with this wonderful plan that incorporates some of these elements that you mentioned, but Mississippi decides, we don't want to do anything. Or, Texas says, we really don't feel like doing this at all. So then you have a patchwork, Senator Brown. Some folks have great coverage and some folks have no coverage at all.
I'm focused right now on what's important for New Hampshire, and I don't believe that those states would not want to provide coverage for their citizens. I believe that once we and other states do it, that they will want to follow suit because there's an opportunity there to create jobs, to create opportunities, to create income for those providers, and not only the doctors, nurses, and hospitals to take advantage of great plans, get competition, and actually create a business like we have, I believe, the greatest healthcare facilities in the world, the greatest doctors, nurses, research facilities in the world. There's a reason why people come here. And as a result of Obamacare, those innovations are being thwarted. Look at the medical device tax. Go speak to Dean downtown Manchester, one of the greatest innovators in our state. And he said the medical device tax, as a result of Obamacare, which Senator Shaheen voted for, which I've tried to repeal, is crushing the innovation to help people that he's trying to help.
So what aspects of Obamacare, Senator Brown, you kind of touched on this earlier, but I'd like to hear from you on it again. What aspects of this do you think are a good idea that would make a good plan for New Hampshire?
I'm not going to sit here and develop the entire plan for you, but I will. I've been very public for almost 4 years on my position on these issues. You can certainly Google it, and it'll come up all ways, shape, and forms. But I have said publicly that I believe we should address the pre-existing conditions, the catastrophic care, allowing to cover your kids up to a certain age, allow for, which we don't have, unfortunately, in this bill, the ability to have competition. So there are things, certainly, and
sure, and those things are
the things that are most important to me right now.
And those are popular sometimes among Democrats and Republicans. A lot of people like the idea.
That's a good place to start, isn't it? We've had the first three things we came up with right now, thanks to you in this show. We can start the plan on the basis of those three things. That's great.
Well, here's the thing, though. Some folks say you can't have those goodies unless everybody's participating, unless you have a mandate that everyone's covered, unless everybody's buying insurance, so there's plenty of money in the pool. This is the assumption underlying Obamacare, Romneycare, proposals from the Conservative Heritage Foundation that they put those forward back in the late 80s. So the idea, and you know this, Senator Brown, you're well versed in this better than me, that some people say you can't have dessert without your dinner. You need that mandate. So everybody's in the game, so there's enough money to do all the good stuff.
Well, I believe, once again, if a mandate's important to an individual state and that's how they want to do it, that should be up to them. If they don't want to have a mandate, then they need to come up with a different way. They need to maybe make the free market take part and have some competition in our state to allow insurance companies to come in and actually fight for our business and offer plans that are attractive. That's how I would do it. That's how I would be proposing to it, and I would look forward. Since I have all the experience you just referenced, apparently, I'm happy to be part of the solution and come back and be part of that conversation.
Got a couple more questions for you, Senator Brown, from our wonderful audience here at the Rudman Center at UNH Law. Two questions on the same topic. So here's a tweet from Matthew who says, what is your reaction to the New Hampshire GOP platform position? The GOP platform was just updated over the weekend, as you know, on personhood, banning abortion with no exceptions. Thank you, Matthew, for the tweet, and I have another question on that as well.
Well, as Matthew probably knows, because I think I know who Matthew is, that I'm a pro-choice independent Republican, so I don't agree with that particular part of the platform. However, I have always felt that we are a big tent party. We have the opportunity to agree or disagree. There's only one person in this world I agree with 100%, and that's that woman sitting right there. And
that would be Gail.
That would be my wife. And I don't believe that as a party it's healthy to agree 100% of the time. And quite frankly, as you know, I was the most bipartisan senator in the United States Senate, and that is a stark difference between the over 99% voting record of Senator Shaheen with the president.
Another part of the Republican platform that was updated this weekend that I wanted to ask you about, the platform also says marriage is between one man and one woman as ordained by God. Again, Senator Brown, I wonder how you feel about that.
You know, I've traveled around the state for many, many months now. As people know, it's settled law here, not only in New Hampshire, but all of New England. I'm not going down there to propose any new legislation. I would not support a constitutional amendment. But you know what I have found? People, whether they're straight or gay couples, are concerned about. They're concerned about Obamacare. They're concerned about paying their energy prices, their college costs for kids. They're concerned about border security. They're tired of the gridlock in Washington and the lack of civility between the parties, and that's why I offer them a very real solution.
Well, another question on abortion that I had, and again, thank you for that tweet, Matthew, and we encourage people here still, we have plenty of time to get your questions in for Senator Brown, so these are great. I wanted to ask you about your co-sponsorship a couple years back of a bill called the Woman's Right to Know Act, Senator Brown, would require a woman to wait 24 hours before getting an abortion, review pictures and information about her fetus. Why did you think that this was a good approach?
I'm not familiar with the specific bill that you're referring to.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I feel like I have wrong information then. You were not a co-sponsor of the Women's Right to Know Act.
I've voted on probably 8,000 bills, give or take, in my lifetime. But let me tell you my position on abortion, because I think that's where you're getting.
Yeah, or does that sound like a good idea? That,
let me tell you my position on abortion and life. I believe there are great people on both sides of this very important issue, and I believe we should have more adoptions, and I've made every effort to do that. As I said, I am a pro-choice independent Republican. I believe that women should have access to contraception. I also believe people should have the right to practice their faith and make sure that their faith is not pitted against the government and some of the mandates that are coming down. I think if you're indirectly referring to the Hobby Lobby case that has recently come down, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Obamacare and the federal government trying to mandate people's beliefs. And I believe that people have the right not only to get contraception, but the right also to practice the most fundamental right, which is the freedom of religion to practice their faith.
I think what I was referring to was a bill called the Women's Right to Know Act, which again would require a woman to wait 24 hours before getting an abortion and review pictures and information about her fetus. And I apologize if you were not.
I'd have to refer back, and if you want to get me some information, I'm happy to follow up.
Does that sound like a reasonable thing to you?
Once again, I'm not familiar with what you're referring to.
Okay. All right. We'll move on from there. I did want to ask you about so-called women's issues. I call them so-called women's issues because a lot of other people call them that, and the so-called gender gap between the two parties. Republicans are actively seeking to close the gender gap. Kelly Ayotte's been working on that issue. Two questions for you, Senator Brown, please. Why do you think this gender gap persists, and how can you and other Republican candidates this year close it?
Well, I'll leave that to the political pundits. I know that I have a house full of women, 3 overachieving, hard-charging, accomplished women, 2 of which are independent and obviously following their career paths, of which I and have supported along with Gail. That being said, we need to do anything and everything we can to make sure that they and others have opportunities to, achieve that balance, being a mom, having it all, and obviously having a career. And it is a balance, because I know when my wife got up at 3 in the morning that I was there cooking and getting the kids off to bed, and she would come home and get them to dinner. It's really a team effort.
So why do you suppose this gender gap persists?
And I'll leave that up to you and others to determine. I'm going to go after every vote, male, female, rich, poor, black, white, happy, sad. I'm going after every vote of people in New Hampshire and let them know that they have a real choice in this election.
All right. Well, we'll leave it at that then. We will leave it to the pundits to explain the gender gap. Here's another question from our audience. How will you help students in New Hampshire deal with the rising amount and cost of student loans? And thanks to that person for this question.
Well, it's not about student loans, is it? Is it the question that, is it about student loans or is it about the high cost of education?
This says student loans,
Yeah, I know,
but I'm thinking, yeah.
Well, of course, if you raise the cost of college, the colleges and the federal government are going to give you more loans. I mean, it's a slippery slope. So how do you actually get to the core of the problem? You have to lower college costs. And the only way you're going to do that is to incentivize colleges not to continue to pay, no disrespect to some of the professors here, but some people who are teaching 1 or 2 courses and making hundreds of thousands of dollars, addressing a lot of the mandates that are coming down from the federal governments that are forcing these colleges and universities to put in place programs and hire staff that they may or may not need. So the first thing is to address college costs. And how do you do that? Well, we don't have enough time, so I would just refer people to scottbrown.com. We've already addressed this issue. But let's talk about student loans. Of course I want student loans to be low. When you have the federal government taking over a program, once again, borrowing money at virtually zero and charging our students a high interest rate to the point where $127 billion has been charged on the back of our students to help fund the Department of Education, I don't agree with that. So how do you, in fact, keep them low? Well, Senator Shaheen has proposed taxing our job creators, people who are making money, tax them. I've come up with a different proposal, which is to tax the colleges and universities who have these amazingly large endowment plans of billions of dollars, and guess what? They don't pay any tax. They don't pay a penny. So do you think that they should pay their fair share, just pay a little bit more to allow our students to get their fair share and have their student loans stay low? Yes, I do, and that's my proposal.
So you would tax college endowments?
College endowments, they're tax-free.
Wow. And what would that mean for, like, would there be a threshold, Senator Brown, like small schools, for example, we're here at UNH Law, we're talking big ones.
We're talking the billion-dollar ones.
Wow. How would that go over with the schools? A lot of them are nonprofits.
I am very sure that they would have no problem paying their fair share to help their students with their billions and billions of dollars of endowments that are tax-free. People are criticizing others and want to tax everybody else. So if we're going to spread the wealth and spread the pain, so-called, around, we can do that very easily. They should be paying their fair share as well.
So there's a threshold, though. You wouldn't be taxing the little guys,
no.
The little schools.
No, we're talking about the ones that have over $1 billion.
Okay, well, that's the first I heard of that. It's interesting.
It's been on our website for 3 months.
Coming up in just a moment, we'll take more of your questions for former Massachusetts Senator and U.S. candidate here in New Hampshire, Scott Brown. Thank you for that question. We're here at the Rudman Center, and we'll be taking more of your questions in just a moment. Coming up, we'll dive into energy and also debt and deficit issues. Stay with us. This is The Exchange on NHPR. This is The Exchange on NHPR. I'm Laura Canoy. Welcome back to the first in our series of Rudman Center Conversations with the Candidates at UNH School of Law. Our candidate is the Republican nominee for U.S. Senate, former Massachusetts Senator Scott Brown. And Senator Brown, let's dive into energy because at the outset you said that was one of the big challenges that faces our country. You've said you pretty much support an all-of-the-above energy strategy. How does that apply when it comes to government subsidies? Does the government subsidize any form of energy or does it just get out?
Well, that's a good question. I have voted to eliminate the ethanol subsidy. I felt its useful life was gone. I also supported the production tax credits for wind and to allow them to get off the ground and see if there's a viable option to helping to step back from our dependence on foreign oil. So I think it really depends. There are opportunities to be competitive. And when you look at that all of the above approach, wind, solar, nuclear, hydro, geothermal, siting, permitting, the really important factor is you need people who are being affected by these decisions in the process, and I don't believe that's done quite enough. So when you're looking at all of these issues, The important thing is to have everybody bring up what their priorities are and sit down and hammer them out and come up with a proper solution, a proper tax policy to incentivize job creation, to be competitive on a global basis, and to make sure that we can become energy independent and not pay money to people in countries that want to kill us.
So no to ethanol subsidies, yes to wind subsidies. So not a total free market approach.
Those are the ones that came up and that we had an opportunity to really vote on. There are others that when you want to talk about taking away and changing bills. See, here's the problem with Washington. I think people need to kind of understand the process. If you're not in the majority, you have very little say. And when the majority leader, Harry Reid, wants to bring something up just to spot votes for people to run commercials, he'll do it. And he'll bring up a bill, bring it up in 30 minutes, say, by the way, we're going to bring up a bill, we're going to give it a great title. It's the Save the World bill, and we're going to save the world. And if you don't vote against it, by golly, you hate the world. Well, you actually read the bill and you find out that not only does it not save the world, it actually hurts the world. It actually destroys a lot of the things that you believe in. And then he moves for cloture, which means shuts off debate, doesn't allow any amendments except maybe a couple to his colleagues in the majority party, and then shuts off debate and expects a vote to change the entire policy affecting an industry that is one of the major job creators in our industry. I'm sorry, I'm not going to play that game. I'll take that hit each and every time.
So you're talking about the hit that the Democrats have done against you, the Close Big Oil Tax Loopholes Act. They say defeat of this bill would have saved oil companies $21 billion.
Let me tell you a little bit about that bill. I'm glad you brought it up. First of all, Democrats voted against that bill. Now, are they running the same ads against the Democrats? Mary Landrieu and Begich and others who voted against that, because they recognize that the industry right now that is creating the most jobs, if you go out, like Miguel and I have done, to the Dakotas and other parts of our country in the Midwest, they are very low unemployment. They are creating jobs. They are creating natural gas opportunities. So we can actually potentially export our natural gas, help step back from our dependence on all of the fossil fuels and other energy that we're depending on, and actually pay down our debt and deficit. So to think that we're going to bring up a bill, give it a great title, have Democrats vote against it, and then try to pin it all on me, the thing I love about New Hampshire is that people and voters are very sophisticated. They can see through the negativity. And since they've been running those ads, have you noticed what the polls have been doing?
So did you vote to sustain $21 billion in subsidies and tax breaks for major oil companies?
Did I vote to protect motorists from having gas prices rise to $7, $8, $9 a gallon? Absolutely. And I would do it again, because let me tell you, if you remember what was happening back then, gas was about $4.50 a gallon. Diesel prices were higher. We were in the middle of a financial emergency, in the middle of the tourist season, and to think we're going to take a bill up without having it not go through the process and not allowing me and others to take part in the amendment process, I'm not going to play that game. I'm the most bipartisan senator there. I worked many times across the aisle. If they want to have this conversation, then let's have it. But I'm going to fight for motorists. And here's what you need to know. Senator Shaheen voted against the Keystone Pipeline. She has, in every effort, tried to make sure that energy prices go up by supporting a cap-and-trade scheme, by proposing a national energy tax, to think rates will go up substantially in the middle of this upcoming winter. I'm not sure about you folks, but I paid $65 to fill up the truck. $7.50 last winter to fill up the oil tank, and guess what? We were thinking about turning on the heat this morning and chose not to because of the high cost of fuel.
So, broader philosophical question then. This bill aside and all the politicking around it, broader question, do American oil companies, especially the big guys, do they need subsidies?
If we're going to have that conversation, let's have it. I'm happy to be part of it.
Yeah, what
do
you
we
think?
Didn't have that conversation, did we?
Yeah.
No, we didn't. When we had a conversation about the ethanol subsidy, I voted to repeal it because we had all the cards on the table. We knew how it would affect job creation. We knew how it would affect our energy independence. We knew how it would affect us in a global marketplace. To think we're going to single out a particular industry, I don't care what it is, and make sure that they can't compete on a global basis without having all the facts, that's not how I operate. Because what I do is I read the bills. I'm not like Nancy Pelosi and pass it before I see what's in it. I see how they affect our state, our country, our debt, and our deficit, and I vote, period.
So do oil and gas companies deserve subsidies?
Once again, we need to have that conversation. Let's put all the facts on the
Not sure
table.
then at this point, yeah.
No, please, don't put words in my mouth. I said we need to have that conversation, and we need to have all the facts on the table, and that was not an instance when they did. How do you and others, or Senator Shaheen and the people that are running those ads, how do they explain to the Democrats that voted the very same way that I did?
And I hear you on the politing. I'm just philosophically
reality.
curious
No, that's
as to
reality.
whether profitable
Well, let me ask you a
giant
question.
oil
Let me
companies
ask you
need
a
subsidies.
question. If we're talking about tax breaks, the homeowner interest deduction, that's a loophole.
Sure.
The child care tax credit, the R&D tax credit, the investment tax credit, these are all loopholes. So when you hear the president and others saying, we have to close all the loopholes, well, sir, what are they? Have you ever heard him say what they are? I have not. So if
But
you
there's
wanna
a difference between ExxonMobil and your average homeowner.
We give a tremendous amount of help to our wind and solar entities as well. So if we're going to have a conversation about energy, I'm all in, I'm all ears. But let's have that conversation after going through the committee process and actually having a conversation past an hour.
Well, I would love to talk to you more about that, but we're going to move on.
I would love to talk right back.
We're going to move on to another energy-related issue, Senator Brown, and let's talk about climate change, given that this is a big issue this week, right? I mean, world leaders are gathering in New York City to talk about this, tens of thousands of people rallying in the streets to call for more action on climate change. Here's my question for you, Senator Brown. At this point, the vast majority of the world's climate scientists say our climate's changing, say that man-made greenhouse gases are responsible. You said you're still not sure mankind is the driving factor. What is it that you're still not sure about?
Well, let me tell you what I said, because that's not exactly what
Sure.
I said. I said that it's a combination approach. Is it man-made or natural? I said it's a combination of the approach. And my question is, how do we deal with it? How do we live and respect our environment and also create jobs and live in that environment and be competitive on a global basis? How do we strike that balance? And one of the ways I think we strike that balance is to make sure that we provide information. We have all the information at our disposal, and we have that all-the-above approach, the wind, solar, nuclear, hydro, geothermal, siting, permitting, making sure that people are part of the process. To think that we're not going to approve something like the Keystone Pipeline, which creates good union and non-union jobs to get more energy into the system to stabilize our prices and not allow us to rely on people that want to hurt and kill us. And to not think that we're going to develop our natural resources in a respectful, thoughtful way. I believe we have the technology and the brain power to do it correctly. And if we don't lead in that regard, then others are going to lead. And
How concerned are you about climate change? People meeting in New York say this is the crisis.
well, I would argue that right now we have many crises, and I believe that our world is on fire right now. I believe that ISIS is a real threat. I believe that what's happening with Putin, with Ukraine and Crimea is real. I believe the challenges that Israel and Hamas are facing are real. And I also believe that's what's happening with Boko Haram and enslaving young girls and trying to turn their faith against them, and people being beheaded who are from here is real. When I'm out and about, people respect their environment. You and I are both triathletes, okay? We both swim, run, bike in our environment. I have great respect for our natural resources. I want to find a way to strike that balance to make sure that we can not only live and enjoy those resources, but also be able to create jobs, become energy efficient, and make sure that we don't have to rely on other people.
Well, and I want to let everybody here know that Senator Brown did a triathlon over on the Seacoast this weekend and came in third in your age group.
Nice try. You know what I came in? I beat your husband. Oh. That's what she's really trying to say.
First in his age group.
No, I was second.
Second in his age group.
Your husband was fifth.
Good job on that, Senator Brown. Here's another question from our audience here at the Rudman Center. It's a good one. How would you protect Social Security for today's seniors and strengthen it for future generations? This is from Sherry, who's in the audience here. Thank you, Sherry.
Well, Sherry, thank you. That's my mom's concern, Gail, and our concern. Obviously, anyone who's getting it or about to get it is going to be grandmother, grandfather. There's no conversation, regardless of what you're seeing in commercials or the rhetoric, there's no conversation from ARP and others, I hope, that we're going to take anything away from the people that are getting it. But if we don't have a conversation, once again, by getting all of the interest groups, including you, at the table to come up with a proper solution, it's not going to be there for my kids and my grandkids. So I'm looking forward to, I've offered to be part of that committee to sit down and figure out where we go and what we do. And that's it.
I remember a couple elections ago, and they're all starting to blur in my head at this point. We've covered so many. But for a time, partial privatization of Social Security was on the table. How do you feel about that, Senator Brown, as a concept?
Is that part of the conversation? Let's have that conversation, have it be part of it. That's one idea. I'd like to hear other ideas, too.
What about the idea of raising the age of retirement? Some people say if you do that, you're going to save a fair bit of cash just with one quick fix.
Anybody who's about to get it and who has it now will not be affected. Is that something that others have discussed and want to look at? I'm all ears. I'd like to hear what else they have as a solution, because we need to do something to make sure it's viable for our kids and grandkids.
I want to come back to an issue that you've raised a couple times, Senator Brown. You said you were the most bipartisan senator in
Snow
Washington.
And I, within millimeter, either one, first, second, or third. Yep,
but who's counting?
Well, everybody is, actually.
Just like on the triathlon age group thing there. You've called yourself a 50-50 guy. So that says to me, you can correct me if I'm wrong, clearly you don't have a problem doing that, which is great. On what issues do you think, Senator Brown, the Republicans got it wrong? If you're a 50-50 guy, that means you're going with Democrats 50% of the time. So where do you think the Republicans got it wrong?
Well, one instance I thought they got it wrong, and I was actually able to convince some of my Republican colleagues to come along with me, was on the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. As you know, I've served 35 years in the military, and I have known many men and women who have served, and I was deeply moved when I visited Walter Reed, and you see men and women there who have no limbs, none. And I will never, ever forget seeing this young soldier who had just a stub of an arm, and he's doing stomach crunches. And I just looked at him and I said, wow. Went over and talked to him. I'm not saying that he was gay or straight, gay or not gay, but I said to myself, I don't care what the sexual orientation is for somebody who's giving up life and limb to protect and defend this country. I wanted to make sure that if somebody's coming back in a body bag or they've lost limbs like that young soldier, that they would be treated with dignity and respect. And I made a decision based on my 35 years in the military to find the facts. And what does that mean to me? That means that I spoke with the Joint Chiefs. I went to the field and asked the leaders on the ground. I went and spoke to the soldiers and asked how that would affect morale in the middle of the battle, in the middle of our world skirmishes. How would it affect the mission? Because that really, it's not about sexual orientation, it's about the mission. It's about the safety and security of the men and women that are serving. And when you're serving in a fighting position with a soldier, you're not asking whether he or she's gay or straight, you're asking whether they got your back. And that's how I feel. So when you say, did I get some grief for it? Yeah, I got some grief for it, but you know what? I felt it was the right thing to do, and there's the difference between Senator Shaheen and me. I will buck my party. She has voted with the administration 99% of the time. She's been silent on foreign policy. She's been wrong on the border. She's been hurting our energy opportunities, and we need independent leadership.
During your race for the Republican primary, Senator Brown, you talked a lot about your New Hampshire roots, stressing you were born at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, your family's long ties to the state. And yet here's a tweet that we got before we went on the air from someone who says, why didn't you stay in Massachusetts and become the next governor there? Why move to New Hampshire and run for U.S. Senate here instead of waiting for another political opportunity to open up in the Bay State?
Well, it's interesting that somebody would assume that it's based on politics. But like many people in this room probably, I have a mom who's starting to get dementia and is very needy. And my sister and I are very aware of the situation and have been for a couple of years. And so when Gail and I make family decisions, with all due respect to people's assumptions about why we're doing things, I would ask them to defer to the fact that my family is way more important than any political race. And the fact that my mom lives 4 miles away from me and 3 miles away from my sister, and we have a care plan that works, is a good thing. And the fact that my sister's here and my nieces and nephews, and I have long and strong ties, and I'll share a quick story. I know we have a little bit of time, but if it wasn't for my experiences at Hoyt's Cabins with my grandmother, when my mom and dad were married and divorced 4 times each, when I lived in 17 houses, when there was a tremendous amount of abuse against me and my mom and sister, had I not had that safety and security of being with my grandmother those summers, every single summer, I wouldn't be here speaking to you. We have such a love for where we live right now. There's a reason we live there, because I remember when life was tough, and then having an opportunity to know that I could go with Graham and hang out at Hoyt's Cabins and climb the rocks to escape. So, with all due respect to the naysayers and doubters, I'll put my long and strong family roots of 9 generations in this state, me being a son of the American Revolution out of Newington, Gail and I being property owner taxpayers for almost 23, 4, 5 years against anybody. And here's the final comment on this. Gene's from Missouri. Bob Smith was from New Jersey or New York. Jim was from Connecticut. Maggie Hassan's from Massachusetts. I'll let everyone else fight about where we're from. I'm going to talk about where we're going, because we all care about New Hampshire, every single one of us. Gene cares about New Hampshire. I care about New Hampshire. And guess what? We're going in the wrong direction. We're losing the New Hampshire advantage. We're having very serious, real problems. And what I'm doing, I'm talking about issues. I'm not talking about commercials. When I write a commercial and do a commercial, I'm Scott Brown, and I approve this message.
Well, Scott Brown, thank you so much for being with us, Senator Brown, and good luck with your mom. That's a tough
Thank you.
situation.
Yes, it
I
is.
appreciate
Thank
that. That wraps up the first of our Rudman Center conversations with the candidates. I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight, especially the team at NHPR and UNH Law. Again, to you, Senator Brown, for being with us. This is The Exchange on NHPR.